The city at night can be a strange and unsettling place, especially when you're alone in the darkness. I'd been making food deliveries for about a month or so to earn some extra money while at college. I've navigated these streets countless times, but tonight was different. Tonight, I felt like I was being watched. Shortly after starting my route, I noticed a rusted old pickup truck driving behind me. Something about it sparked a feeling of déjà vu. Had I seen this truck before? I tried to tell myself that it was nothing. I was just being paranoid. But with each delivery I made, the unease grew. My first stop was an old, dilapidated apartment building on the outskirts of town. The address seemed to lead to a place that time had forgotten. As I climbed the creaky stairs to the third floor, the flickering fluorescent lights dimly lit the peeling wallpaper. I knocked on the door of apartment 3B and waited. A tall, lanky man answered, his face hidden beneath a hood. He muttered a thanks and snatched the bag of food from my hand. My next delivery took me to a quiet suburban neighborhood where the streets were lined with neatly manicured lawns and well-kept houses. As I made my way back to my car after dropping off the bag, I froze in my steps. Parked across the street was that same old pickup. I stared intently, trying to see if I could make out the driver. He must have noticed, because he soon sped off. I made sure that the rest of the night, I had my pepper spray in hand as I went to make each drop-off. The night went on and I didn't see the truck again, which helped put my mind at ease. It was getting late, and I decided that my next stop would be my last. It was on a street that seemed lined with abandoned buildings. I was led to an old motel. It was run down and covered in graffiti. My sense of calm had quickly faded away. My drop-off was on the second floor. I hesitantly climbed the stairs to deliver the bag, and as I was making my way back to the staircase, I froze. Down in the parking lot, I saw that pickup truck pull in and park directly behind my car. The door opened and a large man stepped out. There was something in his hand. A knife? A club? I hesitated for a moment, wondering how to get out of this situation. Should I try knocking on one of the doors to see if they'll let me in? In this neighborhood, at this building, I didn't dare. The kind of people living here were surely just as dangerous as the man in the parking lot. He was staring right at me. I had to run. I ran for the stairs on the opposite side of the building, the man taking off at the same time to try and get there before me. Luckily, I had run track in high school and was able to stay ahead of him. I shot down the stairs and without thinking made my way into an abandoned building across the street. I ran through the building, hearing the man's heavy footsteps close behind me. I could barely see even a foot in front of me. Soon, I reached a wall and felt a door. I burst through, thanking God that I found someplace I could hide. I slammed the door behind me, but my relief was short-lived as I saw a group of men huddled around a flaming trash can in the center of the room. The men turned their attention to me as I pinned my back against the door. "Well," one of them said, "what have we got here?" I choked back my tears as the men approached me. Suddenly, there was a vicious pounding on the door behind me that stopped the men in their tracks. I dove to the side as the door burst open and the large man stepped inside. One of the homeless men stepped towards the large man, puffing out his chest, and in a gruff voice asking, "What the hell are you doing here?" In an instant, the large man pulled his knife and swung at the vagrant. He fell, gasping in a pool of blood. The others rushed the man. This was my chance to escape. I stumbled for the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I raced through the dark corridors of the building, the sound of the struggle growing fainter behind me. I reached my car and slammed the door shut, tears streaming down my face. I drove away as fast as I could, not daring to look back. When I felt that I was safe enough, I called the police. They searched the building, finding the bodies of the slain homeless men, but there was no sign of the large man or his truck. As the first rays of dawn broke over the city, I returned to the safety of my apartment. I locked all the doors and windows, barricading myself in my room. Days turned into weeks, and the fear never left me. I quit my job as a food delivery driver, unable to bear the thought of venturing out into the night again. I've tried to put it all behind me, but the feeling of being watched, of being stalked, lingers on. I've become a prisoner in my own home, unable to escape the ever-present sense of dread that haunts me.
The moon hung low and full in the clear night sky, casting just enough light for us to see our way through the dense swamp. Fog hung thick in the air as we pushed on, not knowing where we were going. The year was 1885, and the time when men like us could live freely. Manifest destiny had pushed newfound civilization further west, engulfing the vast plains where we had made our home. I never considered myself a villain, although the law would probably disagree with that. Perhaps it's the romantic in me, but I always saw a certain nobility in the things we did. We were the last line of defense against the great civilization that was consuming this country like a cancer. Our posse wasn't what it once was. 7 of them had made their way down to Mexico to become scalp hunters, a disgraceful profession. More still had left for a more domestic life, wives and children, little ranches that they could call their own. There were only 5 of us left when we stuck up that bank 2 days ago. It all went bad. I had been worried about Nelson lately. He had a distant look in his eyes, and he didn't seem like himself. He was on edge during the stick-up. The pressure grew and there was a shootout. An old woman got caught in the crossfire. Jody and Frederick were cut down by the lawmen as we raced from the scene. Now there was only Nelson, little Pete, and myself. Now, here we found ourselves, trudging through this godforsaken swamp in the middle of the night, with the law hot on our tail. All we had with us was the clothes on our backs, a handful of bullets, and 2 sticks of dynamite left over from when we derailed a train for a robbery about a month ago. Just then, I saw something at the edge of the tree line. It was a sign. As we made our way to it, we saw the faded words, "Welcome to Fiddler's Gulch." Thank God, a place to hide out while the heat died down. It didn't take long walking amongst the broken-down buildings to realize that this town had been long abandoned. Would miracles never cease? We split up to search the buildings for whatever food and supplies we could scavenge, agreeing to meet up in the saloon in the center of town in 30 minutes or so. I entered a tailor's shop and was looking through the cabinets when I heard a movement on the far side of the room. I pulled my Colt and yelled, "Who's that in the dark?" A Mexican woman came out from behind some large reams of fabric leaning up in the corner. Her eyes were frantic as she held her finger to her lips, indicating for me to be quiet. I had a bad feeling about this, but as I looked, I could see a small child was still hiding behind her. What the hell was going on here? Slowly, I made my way to the woman. She pointed to the back window. I looked out, but didn't see anything at first. But then I noticed a rustling in the trees. I listened closely and heard a low growling. Coyotes? Wolves? I grabbed the woman by the wrist and motioned for her to come with me. She tried to protest, but eventually gave in. When we got outside the building, a large black wolf came around from the back corner. I put myself between the beast and the woman, aiming my revolver when suddenly the animal stood up on its hind legs. This was no wolf, as it seemed to have the torso of a man. The woman pulled at my sleeve. Looking around, I noticed more of these creatures emerging from the swamp around us. I yelled for Nelson and Pete and ran for the saloon as the wolves rushed us from the forest. We made it inside and got to the storeroom in the back of the saloon. Just as we were about to close the door, one of the wolves slashed me across the chest. We barricaded the door as best we could with what we had in the pantry, and I examined my wound. It was bad. I could see the bone in the slashes. I took off my shirt and tied it around my torso as a tourniquet as best I could, but I knew I was just delaying the inevitable. It wouldn't be long before those things would break down the door and get us. The woman introduced herself as Maria. She told us of the stories she'd heard from the natives in these parts about the skinwalkers, creatures that could change their form from human to animal. People around here knew not to go out during a full moon, or else they may fall victim to the monsters that lurked in the swamp. The wolves banged and clawed at the door. It wouldn't be long now. I knew I was fading away. There was no avoiding it. There was a small window at the top of the pantry. This was our only chance. I told Nelson to hand me the last 2 sticks of dynamite and to make their way out of the window. They protested, trying to get me to come with them, but I knew the score. There was no walking away from this for me. Maria, her child, and the men squeezed through the window just in time as the door broke down. I struck a match on the sole of my boot and lit the fuse of the dynamite. I smiled to myself. I could die, satisfied knowing that I'd done at least one good thing with my life.
I pulled the blueberry pie from the oven and set it on the counter to cool. It was a new recipe that I'd never tried before. I found it while cleaning out my grandmother's house after she'd passed away last month. Her home was filled with curiosities brought over from the old country. When I found the box of old cookbooks, I knew that they could give me the edge to finally beat Betty Grable in the annual Pie Bake-Off. 1953 was going to be my year. Betty had been a thorn in my side since she and her husband moved here 2 years ago. She acted as if it all came so naturally to her. The perfectly manicured lawn, her beautifully pressed dresses, her children getting straight A's in their classes. Worst of all was her passive-aggressive attitude. Her snide, offhanded remarks anytime she bested me. The way she befriended the other wives in the neighborhood and slowly turned them against me. So, imagine my shock and dismay when at the pie contest, it was yet again Betty who walked away with the blue ribbon. I decided I couldn't take it any longer. It was time to level the playing field, to make my life as picture-perfect as hers. I went back to the box of old books left to me by my grandmother to find something that would finally put Betty in her place. As I rummaged through the old cookbooks, I found an oddity buried at the bottom of the box. This book had no title, no author, and in fact, no printing of any kind on the front. It was old and felt as if it was bound in old dehydrated leather. I flipped through the pages. This was no cookbook. At least, not in the traditional sense. Inside were instructions for rituals and incantations, ancient things that made my head spin. Looks like Grandma had more secrets than I anticipated. This could put Betty in her place better than any old pie. So, following the diagrams outlined in the book, I set to work, collecting odd ingredients from the spice rack and the pantry. It wasn't long before I had drawn an intricate circle on our gleaming kitchen floor, complete with arcane symbols, and I'd lit candles at each cardinal point. Nervously, I recited the passages from the book, but nothing happened. The room remained as normal as ever. What was wrong with me, I thought to myself. What did I expect to happen? For some voodoo curse to befall Betty? I should clean all this up and put all this foolishness behind me. I went to get the broom from the closet, but when I came back, I found a man standing in the middle of the circle. He wore a finely tailored white suit, his jet black hair slicked back, and his mustache was neatly trimmed. He flashed a toothy smile my way. "Nice to meet you," he said. "The name's Azazel." "What can I do ya for?" Hello there," I said, mustering my most authoritative tone. "I summoned you to help me deal with an unpleasant neighbor." Well, what do we have here? A bored housewife summoning demons to deal with the PTA? My cheeks burned with embarrassment. You're not what I expected. The demon shot me a crooked grin. Expectations can be such a bore, darling. So, what's the deal? Who's on your hit list? I hesitated. What the hell had I gotten myself into? But then I remembered the humiliation, the snide remarks, and the social ostracism I'd endured. Her name is Betty Grabble, I answered, and she's been making my life a living hell. She thinks she's so much better than me. Can you help put her in her place? The demon grinned, revealing rows of jagged teeth. As you wish, but remember, your soul is the price you'll pay. With a wave of its hand, the demon vanished, leaving me in the suffocating darkness. My heart was heavy with guilt and dread. What did I just get myself into? Days turned into weeks, and Betty's once vibrant presence in the neighborhood began to wane. She became reclusive, her cheerful demeanor replaced by an air of melancholy. Rumors spread that she was plagued by a mysterious illness, and sympathy for her grew. I, on the other hand, found myself at the center of attention. My newfound popularity was intoxicating, and I reveled in the admiration and respect her neighbors now showed me. Then one day, as I was working in my garden, there was a sudden thunderous blast from Betty's house across the street. I barely had a chance to look up when something came flying out of her window and landed at my feet. I couldn't believe it. Betty's severed head lay at my feet. The police were baffled. Betty's vacuum cleaner had exploded. They suspected foul play. Of course, with my newfound high standing in the neighborhood, I could never be considered a suspect. Could I? So imagine my surprise when the police came to my door 3 days later. They said that they just had some routine questions to ask. So of course I let them in. It's not like they could pin anything on me. What were they going to do? Charge me with summoning a demon to kill my neighborhood rival? I offered them some pie, and we sat down in my parlor room. I was slicing the pie as they explained Betty's accident appeared to be no accident at all. That vacuum was wired to blow. Then they started asking about the pie bake-off and our perceived rivalry. I tried to keep my cool as I protested my innocence, but perhaps I was becoming too animated as I waved my hands around, forgetting that I was still holding the knife. The policemen were trying to tell me to calm down as the blade slipped from my hand and landed deep in the chest of one of the officers. And that was all it took. I'm going to the electric chair tonight. But it was all worth it knowing that Betty wouldn't be able to show me up anymore.